is China's third biggest trading partner, which is moving on. That partnership is moving on to the improvement of infrastructure, where cooperation will be enhanced from what I know. And we have heard of Belt and Road Initiative, for example, which will take a high and active contribution to that improvement of infrastructure. Then the cooperation will require know-how in international trade and settlements transactions, because when we are doing business together, or when we are learning how to do business, we are being trained. I'm referring to some students, but I know that there are a lot of teachers out there who are part of the audience. Then win-win cooperation is what we are hoping to have. That win-win cooperation probably is a little hard without the knowledge of trade, knowledge of exchange of money, the procedure of financial transactions. So the moves of such settlement transaction from a nice to have capacity or capability to a must to have essential skills are crucially important. Then we are moving on to the phase where people have a win-win cooperation. I got familiar with, I got informed from a bank in China, which is Bank of China. I'm going to talk, sometimes in the seminar, I will refer to Bank of China because that's the bank almost every country in this world has a representative or has an office. Then they said in their website, with the development of economic globalization, trade activities, especially international trade, are characterized by wide coverage, complicated procedures in need of so many details and very precise information, and high level of difficulty in operation and frequent changes happening. What was happening some time ago might be subject to changes today, but the basics are always there. We need to know the basics of transactions, then we will not have any problem. So customers may encounter various difficulties when selecting trade counterpart, trade partners, trade suppliers of goods and things, and determining settlement methods, designing financing package, including different things that might be useful in this world doing business, taking precautions against potential risks. So all those are very, very important in today's world of trade. And this is what we are basically covering in the seminar. Of course, we're not going to be able to cover everything, but we have singled out 3 very, very important aspects of this. Before we go into those 3 segments, it is important to know that international settlement refers to financial activities conducted along different countries in which payments are done or funds are transferred from one country to another in order to settle accounts, debts also, and making claims. So international settlements are money transfers as a result of international clearing in relation to visible trade, what we can do on a daily basis, like transport, import of goods. It's also covering the invisible trade, financial trade, technology transfer, patent, copyright contracts, etc. Financial transaction is also part of it. Foreign exchange market, export credit, bond issues, etc. Paying between governments, which is not under the scope of today's seminar, but it is in the background, information relating to this. So in that, people in political sphere, in military areas, economic environment are dealing with settlement. And there are many others that I haven't talked about, like households, even students. Some of you, your students, for example, will come to China later, and then they have settlement to transfer money from one country to another to do their studies. So those are very, very important concepts. And it is important to know that when we are talking about international trade settlements, there's a kind of, let's say, a little confusion that students and teachers and professors are having, because when we are opening our website, what we see for settlements often is something relating to WTO, World Trade Organization. But when we talk about WTO, that is, let's say, dispute settlements. And basically there's also inheritance settlements, educational expenses, as I said just now, which are in need of, Then in the reference of ambiguity, that is mostly happening in literature. As I said just now, when you are drawing a line and seeing settlements, it's relating to dispute settlements, but in fact, it can be something else, but we often call it payments. Books published in settlements are almost always carrying the title payments, international payments, just like what you see on my screen. International trade and finance, the financial part of that international trade is relating to settlement. Payment methods and international trade, that's still settlement. That is especially at the international level, referring to basically the West. But in China, for example, we have those title of settlement because, well, the definition itself, as we can see here in my slide, the first one is official agreement intended to resolve dispute, as I said before. It can also place typically where people are going. And if I just go a little faster in that, the last part here, we have action or process of settling an account. And that's what we are referring to when we're talking about settlement today. In China, a lot of scholars have written books carrying the title settlement, international trade settlements, international settlements, payments, documents, theories, as you can see here. They are referring to this when they are talking about payments. So that reference is what we need to have in mind when we are following track of this seminar that we are having. And in China as well, which is what we are also talking about a lot today, there is, banks, for example, if you go to websites of banks, you have those settlements written clearly. International trade settlement, like here we have Bank of China, and here we have Industrial Bank of China, still the same thing, and they are giving precision to the methods that we are using. Those methods are what we are going to see today. So then, the seminar deals with the methods of payment, determining how obligations are fulfilled by both buyer and seller in relation to monetary values. The transaction taking place as referred to settlement. It puts emphasis on the application the theories as mixed with the operations and some kind of technical aspect of it relating to documentations. The international trade settlement is a seminar integrated theory with practice somehow, even though today we're not going to handle any money, but we will show you how that transaction, while people are handling money, what are the requirements, what are needed, what are the process and procedures. So if I talk a little bit about the outline of the whole thing for today's seminar and tomorrow, we will start with the overview of settlement and some related terms as well as concepts. Then we're moving on to the real thing, which are remittance, bank transfer, that's somehow the term used to refer to this, and moving on to the letter of credits, what we call LC, and then we finish the whole seminar with what we call documentary collection, I'm sorry. And for these three, we're referring to conceptual framework when we are referring to the theories that we need to know relating to those concepts. Things that we are discussing in schools. And we also refer to what banks are doing, because when we're talking about settlement, when we're talking about transfer of money, that's banks. We are trying to get familiar with what banks are doing. And since the seminar is relating to China, how to do business in China, we associate the bank operation with the Chinese way of doing business. And we end each of those sections with business application, seeing the hands-on experience that people have to handle those transactions, the impact of those transactions in day-to-day business. So those are the things we're going to discuss. I say discuss because I'm going to give the lecture, but you are given the opportunity to ask questions as we go. And at the end, just like my colleague said, Eko Chin, as she was opening the session. So my friends, that's what we're gonna do. Then, let me just move something here. The objective of this seminar, as we could already decipher from what we have talked about, is to understand the fundamentals and basic methods used in settlement. Also to be familiar with the method of payments and acquire basic knowledge in international settlement that is relating to its practice, operation in Chinese market. So the seminar gives assistance on how to do business with Chinese traders. So we are referring to somehow sales and shipments, and because this is where the transaction is taking place. It's not only at the bank and that's it, but people are sending goods from China to other country. Then the banks are referring to those operations, the shipments, sales a little bit. And this is meant to minimize the risks of non-payment for the seller, because there's sometimes a problem when seller is expecting money and that money is never coming. For some reasons, sometimes not the fault of the buyer, but there's something that is going on somewhere that we don't understand. We cover those too. And the buyer themselves probably are losing money. They send the money and it will never reach the hands of the seller. So we clarify those points. That's what we do. And now we are passing on to the overview of international trade settlements. Now, in our daily lives, from the standpoint of the exporters, we have this notion that any exported goods is a gift until payment is received. When you are exporting goods and you don't receive payments, or before you receive that payment, they say it's a gift. While from the importer's perspective, any payment is a donation until goods are received. You give the money, you don't receive goods, then it's a donation. We don't intend to do that in business. So getting paid in full, getting paid on time, not late, is the ultimate goal for each export sale. And the safer the transaction is, and the timely it is also, the satisfaction we get from it in export transaction. That is from the person who is receiving import, for example, expecting to get goods from a supplier. So we have ambition as human beings, and human greeds are there when we have ambition. So sometimes all these are not going in the right direction when that ambition is dominating us. Then we need to know how to understand those ambitions and how to protect ourselves. So in fact, human greeds, then, when we are not very, very careful and we care too much about ourselves, there are questions that we are asking in trade, for example, in settlement. The first question is, who bears the payment and non-payment risks? If something is not paid, who is going to be a victim? Who finances the transaction? Is it, if you are getting some goods from a supplier to the port or to your warehouse, it's not enough to say that you are paying for the goods, but probably you have to pay for transportation or whatever. In some transaction, then the transportation is paid by the supplier, probably you. So it has to be very, very clear. Who will bear the transportation costs and risks? What are the political and legal risks that are involved in that country? If there is any change of government or whatever, does that affect the currency that you are expecting to receive? If there's no, we miss some kind of documentation for such and such clearing, is that going to be hindering us from getting the goods because probably somebody is accusing us for scams or whatever? That's a legal risks that we are running. What are the currency used to pay their transaction? Are you going to use RMB? Are you going to use dollars? Are you going to use the money of your country? Partly the question. What are the costs of each method of financing and payments? The cost of those three types of settlements that I talked about before, but they are not the only ones. So what are the costs? If you are reading books, there are costs there. Some are very, very old. But if you are referring to banks, probably slightly different. So what are the updated costs relating to those? Those are the things we but will answer as we go along, even though we don't answer those questions one by one. But as we listen to the seminar, we should get sense of those issues. Meeting the challenges, that's what we need to do. That is, the appropriate settlement method must be chosen carefully to minimize those non-payment risks and to accommodate the needs of the buyers. You probably become a buyer when you are working with the Chinese traders. We're not going to just talk about those 3 points right away, but we need to somehow refer to the settlements history that we are going through, we have been going through. In the old days, we all have heard of this, barter, where people are exchanging something to something else. I have potatoes and you have tomatoes and we exchange. Or you have some gold and I have fish. Your gold will get a lot of fish, but that is what we call barter, and that is already settlement because people have their properties and you exchange those properties, you exchange titles. Now, we are talking about trade. Trade involves exchanging money for goods. You have those coins and cashes or whatever. Now we are going online and stuff for the exchanges of commodities. Now that brings us to the evolution of international settlements. So from exchange of things tangible things like, as we said, barter, to cash settlements, that's at the beginning. We have examples of commodity to coins that was 5th century, long ago. And then moving on to the situation where we have to work from cash settlement to non-cash settlement, that is from coins to bills of exchange, for example, which are somehow what we are referring to a little later. From direct payment made between international traders to payment made through financial intermediary banks. We're talking about banks at the end of 18th century onward until today. From payments, from then on, we moved on to doing business using payments under simple price terms to payments under more complex price terms. So price terms like cash on delivery, cash before shipment, cash and carry, for example. We heard that the American terms cash and carry, for example, you give me the goods and then you bring the goods. You give me the money and bring the goods today. And we refer to those terms when we are doing business. We write that this transaction will be done with cash and carry terms. But today we are using what we call Incoterms. Incoterms. There is a set term given by the International Chamber of Commerce to us. We're going to see that a little bit more a little later, and I will explain on that. Then from traditional settlement to e-settlement. Now that we are in this situation where the coronavirus is ramping in every country, it has become a pandemic seen at a global level. A lot of people are shifting their payments or transaction from cash into e-settlement, making payments on site before then. Now we are almost doing everything online. So that is the evolution of settlement. Then we need to know the common methods of settlements that we see in literature, in documents we are reading, in books, on the internet. We need to know those. Then, I'm sorry, I just want to see whether my computer is out of. I'm sorry, just a few minutes. I need to connect. Yes. The light went off instantly, so Yeah, I'll be back very soon. Thank you. So, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello?
Hello, yeah, it's okay.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay, okay. Right. So I was talking about the common methods of settlements. When we are reading books or papers or whatever going online, we are likely to see these four terms. We have cash in advance, letters of credit, documentary collections, open account, consignment. In fact, there are 5, for example, which are really, really popular in this field. But I will explain what makes it 3 in terms of what is pretty important in this area. But I will also talk about these, summarizing one by one. As the name suggests, cash in advance is payment we send in advance as an importer, as a buyer. We are to pay the supplier, and we have choices on whether we pay the supplier after receiving goods, during the time we receive goods, or before receiving goods. So with cash in advance, we pay in advance. Okay, so that is a kind of overall idea of cash in advance. Next, we have an open account. An open account transaction is a sale where goods are shipped and delivered before payment is due, which is usually in 30 to 90 days. So open account, and this open account here, the open account and this cash in advance are more or less in the same direction. And then we have this consignment, which is also more or less the same as open account. The only difference is you pay after selling goods. You have the exporter is sending goods to you. You don't pay right away. You go to your market channels. You sell everything. You get the money, and then you are paying the supplier. So that's the consignment. So the others, because just now we knew 3, but the others are part of what we're going to go through into details later. So I just want to summarize here, for example, before I ask a little question to the audience. Again, the open account, delivery before payment. Delivery before payment, okay? It means that the goods are being delivered and then they pay.